Welcome back to another episode of the NRG Oncology Podcast. I'm Lauren Henke, here along with my co-host Stephen Chun, bringing you a new podcast on one of the rarer tumors we work on at NRG. Before we get started, I wanted to also thank all of our listeners and subscribers who are out there. We want to give a special shout out to our listeners in the Philippines, who are our largest audience outside of North America. So if you haven't subscribed yet, follow us on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. Joining us today are Dr. Dian Wang and Dr. Tseng, who are chair and vice chair of the recently created NRG Oncology Sarcoma Subcommittee. Dr. Wang is a professor of radiation oncology at Rush University in Chicago and has long been involved with sarcoma, dating back over 2 decades with the legacy RTOG group. Dr. Tseng is a surgical oncologist specializing in sarcoma at the City of Hope Cancer Center and has been a leader in retroperitoneal sarcoma.
As Lauren mentioned, today we're touching on sarcomas, which are one of the rarer cancers we see at NRG Oncology. There are about 10 to 20,000 sarcomas in the United States each year, and unlike most of the other cancers we treat that originate from specific parts of the body, like, for example, the lung or the breast or the prostate, sarcomas can originate from almost anywhere in the body. And even within the general classification of sarcomas, meaning cancers arising from soft tissues, there are numerous subtypes with vastly different behaviors. There are osteosarcomas of the bone, rhabdomyosarcomas of the muscle, chondrosarcomas of the cartilage, and the list goes on and on. Dr. Wang and Dr. Tseng, can you start off giving our audience a general framework of what sarcomas are and what is the role of multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary care in their management? How do we as a group prioritize which types of sarcoma we can focus on with the resources available?
Yes, so as mentioned, sarcomas are cancers of the soft tissue and bone that affect both adults and children. Sarcomas encompass over 100 histologic types, each with different distinct behavior, responsiveness to treatment, and different outcomes. Given these complexities, multidisciplinary care is critical, and in fact, it's the cornerstone of treatment in sarcoma.
And if you can elaborate, when you say multidisciplinary care, what exactly do you refer to?
So that means care that's a combination of different physicians and providers of different specialties. So, for example, surgical oncology, orthopedic oncology, medical oncology, radiation oncology, even the radiologists and pathologists are all specialized and dedicated to this rare disease.
Well, I think Dr. Chang, you asked an excellent question regarding sarcoma subcommittee, how prioritize sarcoma research in the future, given distinct behavioral and different response associated with each sarcoma subtypes, as Dr. Chen just mentioned that. I believe the breakthrough discoveries from next-generation sequencing studies, biomarker studies, including radiomic studies, will help prioritize our sarcoma research in the future. We are calling for all sarcoma scientists and pharmaceutical partners to work with us to develop targeted therapies, immunotherapies, and so on in combination with standard treatment. I think the previous NRG DT001 is a beautiful example in which MDM2 inhibitor combined with radiation is investigated to treat soft tissue sarcoma with a Y-type p53 gene.
Historically, the legacy RTOG group and NRG Oncology have played a major role in the evolution of the multidisciplinary management of soft tissue sarcomas. I can say, as a residency program director for radiation oncology at Case Western, one of the most important sarcoma trials that's always emphasized in training is RTOG 0630. Dr. Wang, as its principal investigator, can you talk about what 0630 was and how it changed management of soft tissue sarcomas?
Thank you, Dr. Fink, for mentioning this study. The results of this study were initially published in JCO. I think long-term results we recently updated in JAMA Oncology. The results from this study reviewed significant reductions of late side effects related with radiation, while local control after protocol treatment is similar to historical controls. The impact on radiotherapy management of soft tissue sarcoma from this study is enormous. has a standardized preoperative imaging-guided radiation of soft tissue sarcoma nationwide, maybe internationally. The data have been utilized by many insurance companies to approve IMRT for large soft tissue sarcoma these days.
And to just provide some clarity, when Dr. Wall refers to IMRT, we're talking intensity modulated radiation. This is a radiation technique that is able to mold and sculpt radiation doses in convex and concave shapes that are particularly useful for soft tissue sarcomas that might be wrapping around things like the bone. So a very important trial that has validated the importance of advanced radiation technology rather than just using two-dimensional or three-dimensional fields that caused oftentimes many more side effects from radiation. Moving on to another topic, another way in which NRG Oncology contributes to the sarcoma landscape is by collaborating with our pediatric oncology colleagues in the pediatric oncology groups. Can I ask the both of you what the NRG Oncology strategy has been in terms of collaborating with the pediatric oncology groups and how NRG Oncology facilitates accrual to these trials? I'm aware of one notable example, ARST 1321, which was published in Lancet Oncology, where pazopanib, which is a drug that inhibits cancer growth pathways, was used prior to surgery, so true multidisciplinary management. Why was this trial important for our pediatric sarcoma patients, and how has NRG been involved with its design and execution?
I think one of the NRG Sarcoma Subcommittee mission is to collaborate with the Pediatric Oncology Group to help adolescents and young adults patients with sarcoma. We do have members who are also very active in COG group. You mentioned ARST 1321, which is actually the first study the NCI CTAB request RTOG and COG to work together. At that time, RTOG Sarcoma Working Group contributed 2 co-PIs to this study. The 2 co-PIs including Dr. Eileen Tseng, radiation oncologist from MGH, and Dr. Tom Schachmet, orthopedic surgical oncologist from Ohio State University. We developed this protocol jointly with COG colleagues for 1 year, then successfully complete patient accrual, mainly through RTOG and COG. We investigate the role of pazopanib in combination with the standard chemo-RT in extremity soft tissue sarcoma. We reported primary endpoint outcomes in Lancet Oncology. Success in this study suggests that we can collaborate with the COG to help AYA patients with sarcoma. But I believe the NCI support is crucial in building this type of collaboration in future.
I'm really glad that you bring up the theme of collaboration, especially as it relates to the AYA or adult young onset cancer cohort. You've been also collaborating even within the NRG Oncology structure, which has had a lot of changes for the framework for sarcoma recently. We already talked about sarcoma in the context of the legacy RTOG group with Dr. Wang. In addition to the RTOG, the legacy Gynecologic Oncology Group also did studies on leiomyosarcoma, or sarcomas of the uterus. With the inception of the NRG Oncology Group, the sarcoma investigators coalesced initially into the Sarcoma Working Group, but recently the Sarcoma Working Group became the NRG Oncology Sarcoma Subcommittee under the umbrella of the Developmental Therapeutics Committee. Tell us a little bit about that collaborative space. How does the Developmental Therapeutics Committee work, both generally and then also within that sarcoma space? What was the rationale behind that reorganization of our sarcoma forces under developmental therapeutics?
First of all, I would like to thank NRG Oncology leadership to reorganize our sarcoma forces to build Sarcoma Subcommittee, which is important to develop sarcoma research nationwide. As you said, the Sarcoma Subcommittee is currently under the umbrella of the Developmental Therapeutic Committee. To my understanding, the Sarcoma Subcommittee will have its own research meeting, will be able to submit concepts to the Strategic Committee for review and approval. Certainly, we will learn from and work closely with Development Therapeutic Committee.
Over the past 20 years, a time that you've been involved with sarcoma with RTOG and NRG Oncology, we've had a handful of important and big sarcoma studies that we've alluded to earlier in this podcast. Moving the needle forward has been rather hard for sarcoma. Can you tell us what are the biggest challenges that we face in designing and implementing sarcoma trials with NRG Oncology? And what do you think our biggest opportunities are going to be moving forward in this space?
I can tell my thought. The biggest challenge would be to design and implement a large phase 3 trial, simply because sarcoma is a rare disease. The second is to identify targeted therapy, immunotherapy, since the biomarkers and immunotherapy are often investigated in common disease, which led to very few data for sarcoma targeted therapy and less pharmaceutical support of sarcoma research.
In terms of opportunities, I'm very excited about the opportunity to do more trials in retroperitoneal sarcoma. These are sarcomas, the most common of which is liposarcoma that develop in the back of the abdomen. They're very challenging to treat, certainly from a surgical standpoint, but also from a multidisciplinary standpoint. It is an area of critical need that we are in a unique position to address through collaboration.
Despite that sarcomas aren't the most common kind of cancer, I've always been impressed with the willingness of our oncology community to focus on these rare diseases, especially things like pediatric sarcoma, for both patients, healthcare providers, researchers, and anyone else out there interested. How can folks get involved and help with our NRG Oncology Sarcoma program?
I would say reach out to myself, Dian, directly. We are actively seeking scientists with an interest in sarcoma to work side by side with clinicians to design biologically insightful endpoints and correlative studies. At the same time, we also encourage direct participation from sarcoma patients and patient advocacy groups to add valuable personal perspective to the next trials.
I have completely agree with Dr. Tseng. We have opened our hands to welcome any sarcoma researchers and sarcoma patient advocates to join us, to work with us in designing and implementing sarcoma research in future.
Dr. Wang and Dr. Tseng, thank you again for joining us on the NRG Oncology podcast on the newly formed NRG Oncology Sarcoma Subcommittee.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up on our podcast, focusing on sarcoma today, we welcome two guests who have no medical background, aren't cancer survivors, and have never set foot in an NRG Oncology meeting. Our guests are Major League Baseball player Chris Taylor and his wife Mary. Sports fans out there might recognize Chris as a utility player for the Los Angeles Angels. In his career, he's played for the Seattle Mariners and Los Angeles Dodgers, where he was part of the World Series championship team in 2020 and 2024, and was a Major League All-Star in 2021.
I've known Chris's wife, Mary, and Mary's sister, Laura, for almost 3 decades, growing up in Honolulu. Mary is actually an outstanding violinist and was concertmaster of the Columbia University Orchestra, where she studied as an undergraduate. Afterwards, Mary completed law school at the University of Southern California and has worked as an attorney in the Los Angeles area ever since. Mary and Chris, there's probably a lot of people out there wondering why we're having you on this NRG Oncology Sarcoma podcast. What are your personal connections to sarcomas, and why do these cancers matter to you?
For me, one of my best childhood friends I grew up with had osteosarcoma, and he lost his fight a few years back, and that inspired me to start the CT3 Foundation. Obviously, it was personal to me, and it started as us trying to help kids with cancer. My friend's name was Kyle Profile, and we worked directly with his parents, and they helped us pick a couple local foundations to Virginia Beach, specifically Rock Solid Foundation, and we've been helping them out for the last 5 or 6 years.
I met Chris right after his friend passed away, and just shortly after that, my friend Brian Sweet, that I grew up with from kindergarten, he was diagnosed with sarcoma as well, soft tissue sarcoma, I believe, and it was in his abdomen. And we've heard that sarcoma is so rare, but just to have it happen to both of our really close friends, and it showed that it is prevalent still. And Chris ended up having another friend from his parents' neighborhood diagnosed with sarcoma.
Just to add on, as we've been doing this the last 5 years, we've realized it's supposed to be such a rare cancer. And I feel like it's come up 4 or 5 times. We've met some through Rock Solid Foundation, but just in general, like one kid from my parents' neighborhood, he lost his battle with Ewing sarcoma. And we're realizing it's not as labeled as a rare cancer. It might not be as rare as we think it is. And that doesn't mean it can affect you directly.
I think that's a really good point, that even when a cancer is rare, when it impacts your own personal life, swear on, it certainly doesn't feel rare in that setting. One way that you have worked to advocate for cancer, as you mentioned, is through the CT3 Foundation. As I understand it, CT3 stands for Chris's name. But where did this abbreviation CT3 come from, and what are the main goals of the CT3 Foundation, especially for sarcomas?
Yeah, CT are my initials, and then the number 3 is my baseball number. And that was just kind of a nickname with the Dodgers that I got, and I decided to use that as the foundation name. But we're learning as we go, and we just want to help any way we can. And it started locally in Virginia Beach. We've done a few events for the Rock Solid Foundation, and their mission is to directly help the families that are involved with the kids with cancer. And then also they build play sets for the kids. They work all over the country. We've done a couple builds with them out in the Los Angeles area as well. But I think their idea is when the kid is playing, they're not focused on the cancer. And I think that was how the mission started. And we've also done a couple events out in LA. I don't know if Mary wants to talk about those.
Rock Solid is really important. It focuses on, the emotional aspect of it, the toll it takes on the family, and they focus on the young kids with any type of cancer. But we also have worked with 2 hospitals, CHKD, Children's Hospital of the King's Daughter here in Hampton Roads area, and then CHLA. So we're really interested, and we've talked about this with a few families who have lost their kids to cancer, sarcoma. The emotional aspect is really important, but what really would be the best is if we could invest in the proper research and eliminate these cancers and have better treatments for them. So that's something that we're interested in going forward, and why we've partnered with these hospitals.
You both talked about how these tumors are uncommon, perhaps not entirely uncommon, but certainly uncommon compared to things like breast cancer or prostate cancer. And it's for this reason that it's hard for single institutions to get enough patients to conduct a major clinical trial. And this is why the NRG Oncology Group has been at the forefront of conducting some of the practice-changing studies for sarcoma. Could you both talk about how the goals of the CT3 Foundation might align with our national sarcoma efforts, like with NRG Oncology? And I even wonder if you envision potential opportunities for collaboration between CT3 and groups like the NRG Oncology Group. I wonder if a small CT3 Foundation pilot might serve as the basis for a larger NRG Oncology concept.
Like we mentioned, I guess 2 things. First, like what we touched on initially regarding the quote-unquote rarity of these cancers, but how I'm from Hawaii, Chris is from Virginia. It's touched both of our lives, but it doesn't seem like when someone is diagnosed with a type of sarcoma, there is that clear path forward the way that there is with, like you mentioned, prostate cancer or breast cancer, a clear treatment plan that it kind of seems like it's more pieced together. And we're obviously not medical professionals, but it just in our experience, that's something we have noticed and something that with our foundation we would want to support. And you guys are the leaders of that. So whatever we could do to help, we would certainly be interested in doing that.
Like Mary touched on, really focused a lot on helping the families and the emotional side of the cancer, which can be devastating. But we would like to make more of an impact on helping in any research that goes into it where we can actually hopefully do something to help the kids and maybe save lives. And that would be a huge step forward. And we don't know the answers and the right path towards that. So working with other organizations would definitely be the move.
I would just say I think in rare cancers, the patient and family advocacy and support groups and foundations that, are kind of helping bolster cancer care from that angle sometimes are also really wonderful networks for helping to connect patients with existing clinical trials. I treat gastrointestinal cancers, and a rare cancer in that setting is cholangiocarcinoma. And we rely really heavily on foundations like the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation to help direct patients and families, if you will, and link them in with resources, including trials. So maybe even just on a level like that, there's opportunity for connection building between CT3 and NRG Oncology.
We come into contact with a lot of families, just even through Chris's job. Families will reach out to us knowing that we have a foundation, asking for whatever resources we have. And sometimes we feel like, we can only do so much, and clinical trials or things like that, like that's what they really need. I don't think that everyone necessarily is looking for a play set in their backyard, so I think that would be something that we could definitely do.
Well, it would be fun to explore those connections. And honestly, we're really grateful for the work that foundations like yours do to help support patients and families too. Stephen and I know very little about baseball. And so as we make these connections and conversations, we wanted to have a little bit of fun today too and turn to a familiar face from our team who loves to talk about sports and also about cancer. So we're pulling in a surprise host today, Dr. Wally Curran. Dr. Curran is our longtime NRG Oncology Group Chair and served as director of the Emory University Winship Cancer Institute until 2021. You might even recall seeing Dr. Curran on the news as one of Jimmy Carter's physicians for melanoma at Emory. He is currently the Whitaker Endowed Chief of Piedmont Oncology in Georgia. Dr. Curran, welcome aboard, and we'll turn some of the podcasts over to you here to have a little bit of fun.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren and Stephen, and Chris and Mary. Really appreciate you being on and really appreciate the great work you're doing for the foundation, because I think having a sarcoma foundation, and I'm sure you've experienced this, number one, gets awareness of this disease out there. And as you're learning, even things that are considered medically rare end up touching so many people in so many difficult ways. The other point about sarcoma is it's really so many diseases under the umbrella of that name. And I think progress against them is really going to be on a subtype by subtype basis. The molecular profiling and the targeted therapies are going to be different across different types of sarcoma. And I'm guessing you guys are getting a pretty intense education about that. But Stephen and Lauren asked me not to talk about that, but somehow the field of oncology is so weak that someone like myself is considered an expert in baseball, which I'm hardly that. But I can tell you, Chris, my daughter who lives in Los Angeles is, number one, a huge Dodgers fan. But prior to this call being set up, I knew what a huge Chris Taylor fan she is. And her 2-year-old and 4-year-old sons wear Dodgers gear more than anything else when they're outside. And one thing my daughter told me about you, Chris, is in her view, you had the best walk-up song among the Dodgers. She said it was a female vocalist. So I'm here to ask you what that song was, and do you have the same song with the Angels?
I think so. I've changed it a few times, but I'm guessing it was Dua Lipa, Levitating, and that's probably a credit to my wife, Mary. She usually chooses my walkout songs, believe it or not.
Well, I'll give him a few options, and then he goes from there. But
Good.
if it was up to him, it would be probably country music, mostly.
Before we met, I think it was Copperhead Road by Steve Earle, so quite the 180 there.
Yeah, well, all I know is when someone commented to my daughter somewhere along the way, it's like, how do you know so much about sports? Her answer was, well, do you know my dad? And I guess I was that kind of crazy influence on her over the years. But her 4-year-old son, my grandson, loves Dodgers. And when we were out last summer, I live in Atlanta, so they brought us to a Braves Dodgers game, which was won pretty convincingly by the home team out there. And so one of the things that you guys know is oncology is a team sport. There's no one doctor who really takes care of almost any type of oncology patient. It's a team of physicians, nurses, technicians, but it's also multiple teams. And I'd just be curious to hear from you, Chris, on sort of lessons learned going from one team that was sort of kind of perennially at the championship level to a team cross town that wants to get there, and any observations you have on what it takes in terms of a culture to get where the Angels want to get.
Yeah, obviously switching from the Dodgers to the Angels was definitely a change of pace for me. Coming from an organization, like you said, that's been to the playoffs for the last, I don't even know, before I got there, probably 12 years or something, maybe more than that, to a team that hasn't been there since, I think, 2014. With the Dodgers, you have a lot of veteran players that have been around, some, future Hall of Famers. And with the Angels, there's a lot of young guys. It's a very young group, young, talented group. But I think a lot of that is they're trying to learn how to win and what it takes. And, I felt like coming into that role of being a guy that's been around and been to the playoffs, it was kind of refreshing for me, coming from a team that didn't necessarily need that, going to the Angels and being able to work with these young guys. And, I really felt like I had a lot to offer them. So it was a good experience for me. I loved playing with the Angels. Obviously, we didn't get to the playoffs like we wanted to, but I do think that team is moving in the right direction. I'm a free agent this year. I don't know if I'll be back. I loved my experience with there, and it's obviously great staying home in LA. So we'll have to see what happens. But yeah, overall, I have nothing but positive things to say about the organization.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, it is interesting that when any of us move from one organization to another, we might not feel that we ourselves change, but our role in the organization changes. And that probably happened when you went from the Dodgers to the Angels, That's kind of neat to stretch yourself in that way.
Yeah, and I'm super thankful for my time with the Dodgers, but I do think the change was good for me. I think I had kind of reached a point with the Dodgers where I wasn't playing a whole lot. And for me personally, it was refreshing. And at this point in my career, I do think there's a lot I can offer aside from what I do on the field. So
Sure.
I think that experience kind of opened my eyes to that.
I happened to see the Mariners when they came to Atlanta, which is an infrequent rivalry. But what was fascinating is how the large number of Mariners fans that came there. I mean, I know the Seattle Seahawks fans travel, but apparently the Mariners fans travel as well, which is kind of neat.
Yeah, that Seattle fan base is actually very passionate about their sports. Not just the Seahawks and the Mariners, but also their soccer team. I think it's the Sounders. My experience there in Seattle, they can really get into their sports. I think before the Sounders games, do like a full marching band parade, going to the games. They have like the biggest MLS fans in the country, I think.
Yeah. I have one final question for you, and that is for the two of you, what has been the biggest surprise to you about establishing and operating a foundation such as yours?
I think so. We started the foundation, and it was just the two of us and Chris's financial advisor. And I think people might underestimate how hard it is to run a foundation and how much goes into the back end of it. And as we've had these big events and we've raised so much money. I think we put the pieces together and developed a well-oiled machine, but getting started, it has been challenging. But for me, that has been the biggest surprise.
To add on to what Mary said, I know she's kind of taken the brunt of a lot of that work, especially when I'm in season. For a while there, I think the last couple of years we've gotten some help, and we've kind of created a team that's really helped us out with some of these bigger events, especially our polar plunge out in Manhattan Beach. But a lot of that extra work has fallen on her with me in the middle of my baseball season. So I think I can speak for her when I say she was probably pretty surprised about how much it actually took and how much goes behind the scenes of these events. The overall experience, it's obviously a lot of hard work and there's a lot of frustration that can come with it. But once the event is done and you're able to hand the checks to the beneficiaries, that's the best feeling, and that's what it's all for.
One more thing is kind of a pleasant surprise is people do seem to be looking for something good to do. I think there's so much going on in the world that's dark all the time, and I think the way your teammates have supported you, the way the community has supported us, and just people in your life who have stepped up and had more organizational roles in our foundation, with our foundation, it's been surprising in a good way, just to see how willing they are to support us and support a good cause.
No, that's great. Stephen and Lauren, I'll turn it back over to you, but thank you again to both of you for coming on this podcast.
Dr. Curran, Mary, and Chris, I just want to thank the three of you again for coming on the NRG Oncology podcast. I think I speak for everyone at NRG Oncology that we'd welcome all three of you to join us at an NRG Oncology meeting anytime if you want to get more involved with what we do trying to move the needle for sarcoma.
Definitely. Thank you guys so much for having us. I know we don't have much to offer in the medical space, but we do really care about this cause and we appreciate everything you guys are doing.
Yeah, thank you for having us. And we're absolutely open to, like we talked about, I think we're learning as we go and we want to make an impact any way we can, and adding to the research and helping save lives is our main focus. So definitely working with organizations like yours would be beneficial.
On a sadder note, it is with regret that Dr. Brian Van Teen, the recently appointed Medical Oncology Vice Chair of the Sarcoma Subcommittee, could not join us today. For those of you who hadn't heard, it is with great shock and sadness that Dr. Van Teen died unexpectedly in November 2025 at the age of 53. Dr. Van Teen had long been involved with the NRG Oncology Sarcoma program, bringing an enormous wealth of experience on sarcoma biology for pediatric and adult patients, both of whom he treated in his clinical practice. In his prolific career at Washington University in St. Louis, Dr. Van Teen developed one of the largest sarcoma programs at the Barnes Jewish Hospital and the St. Louis Children's Hospital, where he led dozens of translational clinical trials for sarcoma and mentored countless trainees and faculty. He is survived by his husband, Josh Hall, mother Carol, and brother Matthew. No doubt the impact he has had on sarcoma and the people he touched will resonate for years to come. The NRG Oncology Group is supported by grant funding from the National Cancer Institute, and content of this podcast does not necessarily reflect the official views of the National Institutes of Health. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and happy clinical trials.